So I'm going to break down the fights to make after UFC Fight Night Gamrot versus Fiziev. I'm not going to talk about the Vidal and what was her name, Rendon fight. I don't really care who they fight next, if I'm being honest. I'm not going to even talk about Mizuki in a way and Hannah Goldie. But I'll start off with Muhammad Usman versus Jake Collier. I think Muhammad Usman should fight Martin Buday next. I think that fight makes sense. Uh, if Buday is getting a ranked opponent, then you could do Muhammad Usman versus Marcos Lima, the guy who fought Derek Lewis. I think that fight makes sense. I think Marcos would win that against Muhammad Usman, but I guess we'd see what happened. And then for Jake Collier, I'll do Jake Collier versus Austin Lane. I reckon that'd be a good fight. Uh, they could cut Jake Collier, but I'm not quite sure. Or you could do the two former light heavyweights. You could do Jake Collier versus Jamal Pokes. The two light heavyweights that are now like obese. Although Jake Collier is losing weight though, so good on him. He looks in much better shape. So I think he'll be a lot lighter his next fight. So hopefully they give Jake Collier another chance. I like Jake Collier. He's got a good fight style, and I did think he beat Andrei Arlovski for what that's worth. And that Chris Barnett fight was actually really fun. And then moving on, we have Cody Brundage versus Jacob Malkoun. This fight was very interesting. Jacob Malkoun was dominating this fight, but Cody Brundage gets the win via DQ. And since he's got a win, and this man needs to step up. So I think you do Cody Brundage versus Bo Nickel. Cody Brundage got a win. He's coming off a win. He needs to, he's coming off a win technically, and Bo Nickel needs to step up. So yeah, Bo Nickel versus Cody Brundage. I think that's the fight to make 100%. And as for Jacob Malkoun, I wouldn't mind seeing Jacob Malkoun versus Dennis Tuolin if he's still in the UFC. I think that fight makes sense. Dennis Tuolin's only coming off 2 losses. He did beat Jamie Pickett, so that fight could make sense. Or you could do Jacob Malkoun versus Josh Fremd. That probably makes a bit more sense. So yeah, that's the fight I'd like to see. I still feel bad for Jacob Malkoun. He was looking like he was on his way to getting his first finish in the UFC. Instead, he does get a technical finish, but it's a DQ, not going his way. So very unfortunate to see. And then we had a welterweight fight between the Dirty Bird Tim Means and Andre Fialho. Now I think Andre Fialho is probably going to get cut. He's coming off 4 losses, all via KO. Normally the UFC won't keep somebody around like that, so I do think that's probably the last we see of Andre Fialho. If that isn't the case though, I would match Andre Fialho up with Warley Alves, but yeah, I'm not going to give too much thought though, because I do think that's it for Andre Fialho in the UFC. As for the Dirty Bird Tim Means, he gets to remain in the UFC, which is always good. It's always good to see a legend like Tim Means. And honestly, I think this fight was booked in the past, and this guy's coming off a loss now. I think this fight would make some sense, but you could do Tim Means versus Jeremiah Wells. I think this fight does make some sense. I think it'd be a fun fight. Jeremiah Wells is a very dominant, very strong wrestler, so that would be interesting to see if Tim Means can stuff the takedowns. Or you could do Tim Means versus Phil Rowe. That'd be a fun fight. Both boxers. I think that would be a good striking fight for Tim Means. I actually think I'd favour Tim Means in that fight against Phil Rowe, but it'd be a close fight. Tim Means looked really good against Andre Fialho, but it is Andre Fialho. He does seem to have a knack for making fighters look a lot better than they are. I guess it's just because he was a bit overrated. But still, don't want to shit on Andre Fialho. He's probably out of the UFC, but if he gets another fight, I'm not completely opposed to it. The guy was super active, so maybe the UFC will keep him around just for that. And then we had a fight in the bantamweight division between Dan Argueta and Miles Johns. I was trying to remember his name there. So Miles John, he looked really good in that fight. You know, he just dominated Dan Argueta. So for Dan Argueta, I wouldn't mind seeing Dan Argueta versus, where is Dan Argueta in this? Bantamweight's such a stacked division. Okay, so Dan Argueta, he's 55, not years old. I wouldn't mind seeing Dan Argueta versus, I don't know, maybe a Simon Oliveira. I think that'd be a good fight for him. And then as for Miles Johns, you know, you could do Miles Johns versus Taylor Lapierre. I think that fight would make sense. And I think it'd be a good one. Most bantamweight fights are always going to be a good one, though, to be fair. But yeah, I think that'd be a good fight. And then we move on to the main card of Fight Night Gamrot versus Fiziev, which was a fight between Charles Air Jourdain and Ricardo Ramos. Really good performance by Charles Jourdain. He gets the submission over Ricardo Ramos. And I think Charles Jourdain should fight Cub Swanson. He called for it. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it'd be a fun fight. So yeah, sign me up for that one. You know, who would be saying that fight's boring? That fight's just guaranteed entertainment in my opinion. And yeah, why not? You know, technically Cub Swanson's coming off a win over Hakeem Dawodu, so I think that makes a lot of sense. As for Ricardo Ramos, I think Ricardo Ramos should fight. Where is Ricardo Ramos on here? Surely he's not that far back. I think I've missed him. Ricardo Ramos. Oh wow, he's 30. Wow, he's really high up the rankings. I guess you could do Ricardo Ramos versus Jack Shaw. Jack Shaw makes sense. I think Jack Shaw probably needs to step up. He's coming off a win over Makwan and Biakani, so I think that fight would make sense. You know, Jack Shaw made his featherweight debut against Makwan, and yeah, he got a dominant performance there, so I think that makes sense. And then we got a fight that was in the welterweight division between Brian the Butcher Battle. He really needs to make his nickname Boss. Brian Boss Battle. That'd be a lot better in my opinion, but still, against the ghost AJ Fletcher, you know, Brian Battle had a really good performance in that fight. And I think Brian Battle should fight. Where is Brian Battle on the? Brian Battle's 40. I think Brian Battle should fight Muslim Solikov. I think that'd be a good fight for him. Muslim Solikov or a Max Griffin. I think they're good fights for a Brian Battle. And yeah, I think that'd be fun fights, honestly. But as for who AJ Fletcher should fight, I think AJ Fletcher should fight probably. I think you could do AJ Fletcher versus Kanan Song. I think that'd be a good fight actually. You know, I wouldn't mind that fight. Kanan Song coming off a win. AJ Fletcher beat Femba Garimbo, who's not a bad win to have. So yeah, I wouldn't mind that fight. I think that would be a good matchup. I think AJ Fletcher could win that one too. Or you could do AJ Fletcher versus Johan Lanez. You know, I think they're going to rebook Semmelsberger versus Johan Lanez, but I'm not quite sure. But yeah, I guess we'll see what happens there. But I think they'll give AJ Fletcher another fight. He's a fun fighter and he takes some tough fights. You know, you can't hate on him. And then we had an absolute mauling in the women's strawweight division between Marina Rodriguez and Michelle Waterson Gomez. So I'm not going to match Michelle Waterson up with anyone because I think she is going to retire, or at least she's going to take an extended time off. So I don't think there's any point for me to match her up with anyone. But as for Marina Rodriguez, she did call for Tatiana Suarez, but I think isn't Tatiana Suarez booked against somebody? I swear she's booked against someone. Maybe I could have sworn she got booked against someone in December. I could be wrong though. I'm just double checking that. No, okay, so she beat Andrade, and I guess she's not booked against anyone. Yeah, you know what? Honestly, I wouldn't mind that. You know, the 150. I think Weili Zhang is gonna fight Jan next. Jan X Jan. I probably butchered that. So yeah, I think Tatiana Suarez versus Marina Rodriguez does make some sense. At least keep them busy for the meantime. And then we had the co-main event, which was Ferg Nasty, Bryce Mitchell, and Dan Ige. So I think Bryce Mitchell should fight the devil himself, Satan. I think that fight makes the most sense. You know, now, but generally, Bryce Mitchell. I think Bryce Mitchell versus. Honestly, what I think they should just rebook the Mosfight Evloev fight. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I think Evloev's probably going to get booked soon. So maybe you could do Bryce Mitchell versus Yair Rodriguez. That's a good stylistic matchup for Bryce, but also on the feet, a very good stylistic matchup for Yair. So I think that would be a good fight. Or you could do Bryce Mitchell versus Brian Ortega. There's just the featherweight division is so hard to book stuff with. But yeah, I think ideally in an ideal world, I'd want to do Mosfar Evloev versus Bryce Mitchell, but I don't think that's going to happen. I know Josh Emmett's like talking about having a retirement fight at lightweight, which that looks to be what he's going to do next. So I'm not going to say to do him versus Bryce Mitchell. So yeah, I'd say do Mitchell versus Evloev, in my opinion. I think that makes some sense to do next. And then for Dan Ige, I think you do Dan Ige versus Alex Caceres. I think that makes plenty of sense. Alex Caceres coming off a loss to Giga Chikadze, Shikate? Fuck, I forgot how to pronounce his name. But yeah, I think you do Dan Ige versus Alex Caceres. I think that makes a lot of sense to do next. And then we had a fight in the lightweight division. Now, this ended in injury, and we don't know the time frame for when Fiziev's going to be back because they're saying it could be an ACL. We don't know. So I'm not going to match Fiziev up with anybody just because we really don't know when he's going to be back. But I think for Mateus Gamrot, he's talking about top five this, top five that. You're not gonna fight Dustin Poirier because he's your teammate. Chandler's gonna be fighting McGregor. Dariush just beat you. Gaethje's waiting for the title fight. Charles Oliveira is not gonna fight you. Islam Makhachev, he's the champion, and you're not getting a title shot. I really don't think he's gonna get Oliveira. So I would say for Gamrot, he should get Dan Hooker in New Zealand. I know it's not the greatest fight for the people in New Zealand, but maybe Dan Hooker can make something happen in that fight. But yeah, I think they're planning on going to Auckland in February, I believe, for a fight night. So I think Dan Hooker versus Mateus Gamrot would make a lot of sense to do. So I would like to see that fight. Not the biggest barn burner, but maybe Dan Hooker can get his takedown defense working in that fight and just put a beating on Mateus Gamrot, or maybe Mateus Gamrot just wrestles him for 5 rounds. But still, we'll find out either way. So yeah, that's it. They're the fights to make next after UFC Fight Night Fiziev vs Gamrot. So yeah, let me know if you agree with these fights in the comments below. And if you made it this far, make sure to give this video a like. And yeah, thanks for watching. If you're not already, make sure you're subscribed too. Thank you.